Welcome to Haddy the Creator. I'm Haddy, and today we're going to be creating something post-apocalyptic. That's why I have this makeshift costume on, chilling in the wasteland, or my basement. To be honest, these are my kids' football pads, but whatever. We're going to be creating something cool. We're going to be taking a matchbox car and turning it into something you might see in a Mad Max movie. So let's get started. So here's what we're starting with. These are all toys I gathered from the kids' toy room that they don't really use anymore. First thing to do is take this skeleton and chop his head off so we can use this somewhere, because post-apocalyptic cars look so much more menacing when they have skulls on the front of them. Seems to be a common theme in the post-apocalyptic world, and let's just face it, cars with skulls, they're just badass. That clip was from the movie The New Barbarians. Came out in 1983. Old post-apocalyptic movies are kind of funny. I like watching them just to laugh at. So starting with the ambulance, I need to take this thing apart and see what I'm working with. First thing I'm going to do is get these wheels off and then pry off the bottom. I actually bit my fingernail back right there, so I'm using some chopsticks to pry the rest of it off. Now that that's off, I'm trying to envision how this is going to fit on here, and I'm realizing that this bottom frame kind of has some cracks in the plastic, so right now I'm just going to glue and reinforce those. I'm going to have this rubber band on here to hold this in place while the glue dries. Okay, so now I'm going back to the ambulance, and I'm realizing I like this bumper, and I want to kind of drill some holes in it so I can stick some chunks of metal and maybe rebar type looking things and have them poking out the front, so when it rams into stuff it does damage. I'm using my little hand rotor tool to drill in these holes, and it looks like I'm getting really close to my fingers. I felt safe when I was doing it, but if you ever attempt this at home, make sure you're pretty careful. It would suck to get a little hole in your finger. So now I've got about 5 holes in the front of this thing, and it looks pretty good. Grabbed this old Power Rangers Turbo movie that was in the car. Kids have torn it apart and it's all scratched up. It will never play again, so I don't feel bad cutting it up. A lot of people use plastic card, and plastic card's probably a lot easier to work with. This was kind of tricky, but I'm using this just to kind of fill in chunks, and right now I want to make this body just a little lower so it's not quite so hollow. I don't like how it looks from the side with the big hole in the middle of the bottom. So I'm just cutting a piece of this CD to shape and gluing it into place, one on each side. In the post-apocalypse, you just gotta use and scavenge and scrap together whatever you can find, right? So I'm trying not to buy anything for this build, just using stuff that I have around the house and other resources, which I'll show later. Right now on this ambulance, I'm just chopping some of this plastic off, and I realized this whole bottom comes out, which is kind of cool. The thing is pretty filthy, covered in dirt. You can tell the kids played with it quite a bit back in the day. With that extra plastic on, it fits on this bottom a lot better. So now I'm looking at this tractor and this bucket on the front of this tractor and seeing how this might fit on here. I'm gonna go ahead and get the clippers and cut this off. I like these tires, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab those too. Looks like it's been stepped on and the axle's bent a little bit, so no harm there. Those came off fairly easily, and I'm thinking about maybe using one of these tires to stick on the front of this car. So with that bucket off of the tractor, I'm trying to see how it might fit on here, and it looks like it might be pretty cool, but I don't really like the angle that it's coming down. I think it looks a little awkward. I wish I could reinforce it, but it's got these big old tires, so I actually at this point don't know if I want to use this bucket anymore. At this point I realize I don't have everything I need, so I'm going to take a quick break and go dumpster diving. In the neighborhood I live in, they are doing a ton of expansion and building a lot of houses. So in the dumpsters out in front of those new builds, they always throw away a lot of good materials. I managed to find a screen door, which was exactly what I was looking for to reinforce the windows. A lot of these post-apocalyptic cars will have like a wire mesh or some sort of metal plating in the windows. I also found some scrap metal that I'll end up using to reinforce the sides of the car. Just gluing this screen into place on the front of this car, and it's giving the illusion of this metal to protect the driver. I'm sure glass is a hot commodity in the post-apocalypse, especially when you're being shot at and cars are ramming into you. I want this car to look like it's been in a scrap or two already, so the windows have probably already been all knocked out. I like how this is looking. It's coming together pretty nicely. Just taking a look over, and I'm realizing there's also a window on the side, so I want to put some on the side of this as well. And as I'm doing this, I do it on both sides, and and in a second I realized I didn't need to do it on the other side because there's only one window. Oopsie daisy. Oh well, we move on. So now I'm just adjusting this screen. It got a little distorted as I put it in there. I'm just using this little pin tool to move it around a little bit and make the line straight. Now I'm going to measure out a piece of this metal I found in the dumpster as well and cut a chunk out to reinforce this car. A lot of these post-apocalyptic cars will just take metal from anything and throw it on the car and weld it on as metal plating, just extra armor and I guess protection from bullets and ramming. Cutting this metal is pretty easy. It's really thin, almost aluminum, maybe aluminum, I don't know. I'm no metal expert, but it's working out pretty well, gluing it into place. To spread it around on here, I'm using a piece of a zip tie I cut out, and I'm actually going to use pieces of the zip tie as well to put some more spikes on the front of it. I'm going to glue them to the door panels, one on each side. Just cut it at an angle so it has kind of a sharp tip on the front of it. And I think that'll look more menacing as well. I take those chunks of metal and zip tie that I cut off of other pieces and glue them onto the front of the hood here too, so it just looks like it has some more panels that were welded on. I think the first exposure I had to any post-apocalyptic thing was watching Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, probably as a 13 or 12-year-old, with Mel Gibson. I remember I was a fan back then and liked the genre a lot. Now it's time for the bumper. I'm going to cut out some segments of this paper clip and glue that into this bumper. The first piece I cut off flies across the kitchen, so I put my hand over to cover up to make sure I can gather the scraps that fly off. I also remember watching The Road Warrior on TV. It was like an edited version. I remember enjoying all the action scenes, the vehicle combat on the road. Mel Gibson was a beast. But I remember appreciating the aesthetic back then too, all of the scrapped together things, stuff built out of pieces of the old world. I just thought it was a really cool concept, seeing how things were put together and the creativity and all the world. So now the bumper's all put together, I've got the spikes coming out and I like how it looks. So at this point I took another break and went looking for more things that I could stick on this thing to make it look functional and give it more of that old world pieced together look. So I went and found some old circuit boards from a router and different electronics that I had that I was throwing away. I really like the look of these cylinder pieces. They look kind of like barrels, so I detached a couple of those and want to use those on this for sure somewhere. I just don't know where, so I'm kind of experimenting, placing them in different spots and seeing what looks good to me. I remember when Waterworld came out too, I really liked that movie, and I was probably one of the only ones. A lot of people didn't appreciate the movie so much. I guess the story was kind of a bomb, but I really liked it because the visuals were really cool and all of the elements that the world was put together with. I really enjoyed all of that. The base and the giant tanker ship and the jet skis with all of the scrap attached to it. And I just thought it looked really cool aesthetically. So I went ahead and put another panel on the other side, and at this point I decided to go with just one single barrel right on the top, and I'm thinking that it may be full of sand or something, so a guy could stand up there and rest his gun on top of it and shoot at other vehicles passing by. I don't have any miniatures. Maybe I'll pick one up eventually and stick him on top of this car right at this barrel and put his gun on the barrel. But that's what I was thinking for this, and I take this twine and wrap it around the bottom just to give it more depth. I don't know. Maybe rope tied around. I don't know how that would help attach it at all, but I just think it gives it another depth. I'm almost ready to commit to gluing this onto the bottom section, realizing that these green tabs sticking up are preventing it from being flush, so I'm gonna lop those off. Also playing around with the tire placement from those tires I cut off the tractor before. I wanted to put two on top, but then I thought that looked like something else, cartoon penis or something. So I'm looking at maybe putting one on the front. I think that looks cool. I like that. It's kind of like an extra bumper for it to ram into something and kind of help prevent damage to the vehicle. I also decided that the best place for this skull would be right in the center of this tire. As it's such a big skull, it wouldn't really look good on a bumper or anything, so I need to cut some of the excess off the back and get it to fit flush into this tire, and I think that'll be a really cool hood ornament or front piece of this vehicle. At this point, I want to give a quick shout out to my little brother Zach, who who does the music for this video. I really like what he came up with. I was building a post-apocalyptic game and asked him to make some music for me, and this is what he came up with. So I never ended up finishing that. Maybe I will sometime in the future, but for now it'll be the soundtrack to my video. And I'll put a card to his SoundCloud up so you can check him out if you're interested. Here I'm taking some slivers of the CD and kind of sliding them into these metal slots in this siding. I thought this would look cool, give it more of that porcupine, menacing, post-apocalyptic vehicle look. I'm also taking a chopstick and I cut it into a smaller piece and kind of carved it a little bit with my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to attach these to the front. It'll kind of go along with the name I gave this thing of Ambu-Lance. These will be the lances on the front of it. Might not be the most creative name, but hey, it's my first one. Give me a break. Gluing these into place, and with the extra glue I'm going to take another one of those barrel looking things from the circuit board and attach it to the back, and maybe this one is actually a gas container, gas tank for this thing. It's looking pretty complete at this point. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to go ahead and attach a couple more of those spikes from the CD. I saw a couple extra spaces and I broke one off when I was working on it earlier, so I'm going to replace that. And another thing that kind of got me into the post-apocalyptic genre, or being a fan of it, was the very first Fallout game. It wasn't anything like the more recent ones. It was kind of a top-down isometric pixel art game, but it was a lot of fun. I remember putting a lot of hours into it in high school days. I remember I bought it at Costco. It was like a Game of the Year edition or something. It was on sale, and I think I paid like $10 for it, so I was excited about that. At this point I'm taking the Dremel and just putting some nicks and sanding down some areas of the car so it doesn't look new, giving it some battle scars and giving it some character. At this point it's pretty much done, and I'm going to hit it with a coat of this Rust-Oleum paint and primer. This brown color I think would look good because it's kind of like a base for some rust and grime and stuff of the post-apocalypse. Took a piece of tape and threw it on the back here so that I didn't paint inside. I wanted to maintain the lighter color in there so you can still see the details on the chairs and things. And maybe eventually I'll throw a mini or a character in there. And that's pretty much it for this video. I thought I was going to be able to put the whole process from start to finish in one, but I'm already past 10 minutes and figure I'll just throw the painting in a separate video. Thanks for hanging out with me and watching me do this process. It was fun to do and to try out. Maybe I'll do another one in the future. Thanks for listening to me ramble on and chat your ear off, and I'll catch you in the next video.